She's the only one I bake for. That single line stared back at me from my phone screen like a slap. I was sitting at the kitchen table, still in my worn morning robe, a faint breeze slipping through the half-open window. The smell of weak instant coffee mingled with the cool October air. My thumb hovered over the screen, frozen on the bright, happy photograph my mother had just posted on Facebook. Some betrayals don't scream, they whisper. Watch how one quiet birthday morning turned into the ultimate reckoning. There it was, a shimmering party hall, golden fairy lights strung across the ceiling, silver trays piled with pastries, and a three-tier cake sitting proudly in the center. My sister, in a pale pink dress, stood with her hands pressed to her chest in mock surprise. All around her, familiar faces were clapping, cheering, raising glasses. I recognized every one of them. My cousins, my aunts, even the neighbor who never returned my casserole dish. Everyone but me. It was my 29th birthday. I didn't cry. I didn't call anyone. I just let the silence of the room settle around me like a heavy blanket. The only sound was the rhythmic ticking of the wall clock above the fridge. She's the only one I bake for. The words cut deep not because they were loud but because they were casual, as if my existence had been erased in passing. My mother had written that under the photo of the cake. Her famous lemon chiffon. The one she had always claimed she'd make for me when there's time. My lips curled upward into a smile. Not the warm kind I gave out of kindness. No, this one was sharper, colder. Because as much as this hurt, I wasn't powerless. And for the first time in years, I felt something stir inside me that wasn't exhaustion or resignation. It was focus. I zoomed in on the picture. There, in the corner of the frame, the white and green floral arch I'd helped my father build for his retirement celebration years ago. He'd asked me to hold the nails, to measure the lengths. We'd spent a Saturday sanding the edges smooth. After he passed, it was stored in the back of the shed. Seeing it there at her party felt like watching a memory stolen. The first unsettling clue clicked into place. I scrolled through the comments. So beautiful. You raised such a special daughter. Only the favorite gets this treatment, huh? With a laughing emoji. My Aunt Marjorie wrote that last one. She always had a tongue that slipped between sincerity and mockery. But what made my stomach tighten wasn't the joke. It was that Mom had liked it. I sipped the now lukewarm coffee. It tasted bitter. Appropriate. Then came the second picture. The catering table. My sister posing beside it like a hostess. Except that wasn't just any catering. Those serving dishes belonged to the same vendor we had used for Dad's memorial lunch. And I remembered exactly where that invoice had been filed. Under the shared inheritance account. The account with both our names on it. My fingers tightened around the mug. I heard the faint vibration of the fridge, that low hum that usually went unnoticed. But in that silence it sounded like a steady drumbeat. My pulse matched it. I opened the third photo. That one made me sit back. The cake. 3 tiers. Lemon chiffon, topped with sugared lemons and white roses. My mother stood beside it, her arm wrapped proudly around my sister. Her caption beneath, for my one and only. My chest didn't ache, not anymore. Something colder replaced it. I opened the comments section fully and began scrolling like a detective, not a daughter. I noticed timestamps. I noticed tags. The party had started at 7 p.m. last night, the night before my birthday. Not a single text, call, or knock on my door that evening. At 8:12 p.m. my cousin posted a group photo. In it, my chair, the one I usually sat in at family gatherings, was gone. Replaced by a flower stand. A literal space where I should have been. I let out a quiet laugh. It startled me because it didn't sound sad. It sounded steady. I placed my mug down gently. Then I opened my laptop. The first email went to my lawyer. My father's trust had a clause that I'd always remembered, tucked into the legal jargon like a forgotten weapon. Any misuse of shared inheritance funds without joint consent triggers a review. No one had cared about that clause. Except me. The second email was to Mr. Leary, our family accountant. He'd worked with my father for 30 years. He always sent me copies just in case. A habit Mom didn't know about. The third email. That one was different. Quiet. To the Board of Trustees. I had never contacted them directly before, but my name carried weight there. His name did. I didn't explain everything. I just attached 3 carefully selected photographs and wrote, "Please flag this for our upcoming review." I didn't need to say more. I hit send on all three. The clock ticked louder, or maybe my ears had tuned in. 9:17 a.m. The sun shifted slightly, casting stripes of light across the table. I stood, stretching my back slowly as if I'd simply finished a routine task. My robe brushed against my ankles as I walked to the sink and rinsed the mug. Routine motions. Calm exterior. But my mind was humming. I pulled on a cardigan, stepped outside, and walked down the short path to the mailbox. The neighborhood was quiet, only the sound of distant lawnmowers. Ordinary Saturday morning. I picked up the usual bundle of circulars and letters. And right there, sitting among the mail, was a cream-colored envelope, addressed to me in my mother's handwriting. I tore it open carefully. Inside was a plain birthday card with printed flowers. No handwritten note. No signature. Just, "Happy birthday. Love, Mom. Love, Mom." I pressed the card closed slowly. If anything, that flat gesture only confirmed what I already knew. The divide wasn't new. It had just finally come into focus. I tucked the card into my robe pocket, walked back inside, and placed it face down on the counter. Then, for the first time in years, I opened the folder at the bottom of the kitchen drawer. My father's papers. Neatly stacked. Untouched. Waiting. One by one, I spread the documents across the table like puzzle pieces. The trust. The account statements. The annual review schedule. I traced my finger over my father's signature, steady and confident. They had built their little celebration on the assumption that I was still the quiet one. The overlooked one. The one too polite to challenge anything. But they had forgotten, I was also the one he trusted with the details. The sound of a car engine drew my attention to the window. My neighbor's sedan pulled out of their driveway. For a brief moment, I imagined my mother's car pulling up instead. Her voice calling my name. An apology. An explanation. Something. Nothing came. I looked back at the screen. The post had racked up 87 comments now. Someone tagged me in one. A distant cousin wrote, "Where are you?" I didn't reply. I clicked the 3 dots and saved the entire post. Every picture. Every comment. Every timestamp. Evidence. By the time the clock hit 10:03 a.m., the sun had fully flooded the kitchen, but the air inside felt cold. I smoothed the edge of one document and whispered to no one, "All right then." And then, as if on cue, my phone buzzed. A message from my sister. "Hey, hope you're not upset. It was just a little get-together. You know how Mom is," woman shrugging. I stared at the screen for a long moment, my smile returning, sharper this time. I typed back a single line. "Of course. Don't worry about me." Then I set the phone down, flipped my father's folder shut, and exhaled slowly. The betrayal wasn't loud. It was quiet, planned, dressed in pink ribbons and lemon frosting. But they had no idea. The moment I hit send on those 3 emails, everything shifted. I walked to the mirror in the hallway and looked at myself. Tired eyes. Faint lines around the mouth. But the woman staring back wasn't defeated. She was calculating. I adjusted my cardigan and whispered, "You started this. I'll finish it." And just as the words left my mouth, the doorbell rang. I heard the faint vibration of the fridge, that low hum that usually went unnoticed. But in that silence it sounded like a steady drumbeat. My pulse matched it. I opened the 3rd photo. That one made me sit back. The cake. 3 tiers. Lemon chiffon, topped with sugared lemons and white roses. My mother stood beside it, her arm wrapped proudly around my sister. Her caption beneath, "For my one and only." My chest didn't ache, not anymore. Something colder replaced it. I opened the comments section fully and began scrolling like a detective, not a daughter. I noticed timestamps. I noticed tags. The party had started at 7 p.m. last night, the night before my birthday. Not a single text, call, or knock on my door that evening. At 8:12 p.m. my cousin posted a group photo. In it, my chair, the one I usually sat in at family gatherings, was gone. Replaced by a flower stand. A literal space where I should have been. I let out a quiet laugh. It startled me because it didn't sound sad. It sounded steady. I placed my mug down gently. Then I opened my laptop. The first email went to my lawyer. My father's trust had a clause that I'd always remembered, tucked into the legal jargon like a forgotten weapon. Any misuse of shared inheritance funds without joint consent triggers a review. No one had cared about that clause. Except me. The second email was to Mr. Leary, our family accountant. He'd worked with my father for 30 years. He always sent me copies just in case. A habit Mom didn't know about. The third email. That one was different. Quiet. To the Board of Trustees. I had never contacted them directly before, but my name carried weight there. His name did. I didn't explain everything. I just attached 3 carefully selected photographs and wrote, "Please flag this for our upcoming review." I didn't need to say more. I hit send on all 3. The clock ticked louder, or maybe my ears had tuned in. 9:17 a.m. The sun shifted slightly, casting stripes of light across the table. I stood, stretching my back slowly as if I'd simply finished a routine task. My robe brushed against my ankles as I walked to the sink and rinsed the mug. Routine motions. Calm exterior. But my mind was humming. I pulled on a cardigan, stepped outside, and walked down the short path to the mailbox. The neighborhood was quiet, only the sound of distant lawnmowers. Ordinary Saturday morning. I picked up the usual bundle of circulars and letters. And right there, sitting among the mail, was a cream-colored envelope, addressed to me in my mother's handwriting. I tore it open carefully. Inside was a plain birthday card with printed flowers. No handwritten note. No signature. Just, "Happy birthday. Love, Mom." Love, Mom. I pressed the card closed slowly. If anything, that flat gesture only confirmed what I already knew. The divide wasn't new. It had just finally come into focus. I tucked the card into my robe pocket, walked back inside, and placed it face down on the counter. Then, for the first time in years, I opened the folder at the bottom of the kitchen drawer. My father's papers. Neatly stacked. Untouched. Waiting. One by one, I spread the documents across the table like puzzle pieces. The trust. The account statements. The annual review schedule. I traced my finger over my father's signature, steady and confident. They had built their little celebration on the assumption that I was still the quiet one. The overlooked one. The one too polite to challenge anything. But they had forgotten, I was also the one he trusted with the details. The sound of a car engine drew my attention to the window. My neighbor's sedan pulled out of their driveway. For a brief moment, I imagined my mother's car pulling up instead. Her voice calling my name. An apology. An explanation. Something. Nothing came. I looked back at the screen. The post had racked up 87 comments now. Someone tagged me in one. A distant cousin wrote, "Where are you?" I didn't reply. I clicked the 3 dots and saved the entire post. Every picture. Every comment. Every timestamp. Evidence. By the time the clock hit 10:03 a.m., the sun had fully flooded the kitchen, but the air inside felt cold. I smoothed the edge of one document and whispered to no one, "All right then." And then, as if on cue, my phone buzzed. A message from my sister. "Hey, hope you're not upset. It was just a little get-together. You know how Mom is," woman shrugging. I stared at the screen for a long moment, my smile returning, sharper this time. I typed back a single line. "Of course. Don't worry about me." Then I set the phone down, flipped my father's folder shut, and exhaled slowly. The betrayal wasn't loud. It was quiet, planned, dressed in pink ribbons and lemon frosting. But they had no idea. The moment I hit send on those 3 emails, everything shifted. I walked to the mirror in the hallway and looked at myself. Tired eyes. Faint lines around the mouth. But the woman staring back wasn't defeated. She was calculating. I adjusted my cardigan and whispered, "You started this. I'll finish it." And just as the words left my mouth, the doorbell rang. The following morning, the house felt different. Not louder, just heavier, like the air carried a quiet expectation. I brewed my coffee the same way I always did, spooning in the sugar slowly, but my mind was somewhere else entirely. Thursday was only a few days away, and already faint ripples were spreading beneath the surface. The first sign came at 8:47 a.m. My phone buzzed with a message from an unfamiliar number. "Ms. Moore, this is Susan from the trustee board. A preliminary notice was sent to your family members this morning. Just keeping you informed." I stared at the screen, imagining my mother's face when she opened that letter. She'd pour her coffee, sit at the table, and expect another uneventful day. And then, legal language, signatures, official stamps. A reality she couldn't decorate away. I didn't reply right away. I simply set the phone down and let the thought linger. Around noon, my sister called. I answered on the second ring, keeping my voice neutral. Hey, she started, her tone falsely casual. So, Mom got some weird letter today. Weird. I echoed, stirring my soup slowly. Yeah. Something about review and inheritance misuse. She's confused. I almost laughed at the word confused. My mother wasn't confused. She was cornered. But I kept my voice steady. I'm sure she'll figure it out, I said. She hesitated. Did you get one too? I did. Silence stretched for a beat too long. You wouldn't happen to know what this is about, would you? I let the spoon tap gently against the bowl. I do. That was all I said. And I could hear the way her breath caught on the other end, the way her practiced lightness cracked just slightly. Right, she muttered. Well, Mom's a little worked up. She wants everyone over for dinner tomorrow night to talk. Of course she does, I said softly. After we hung up, I looked around my quiet kitchen. This was the moment I'd pictured for years. Not the party, not the photos, but this quiet unraveling. The first cracks appearing in the walls they thought were permanent. The next day's dinner wasn't framed as a confrontation, of course. Mom called it a family discussion, the way she always wrapped sharp edges in soft words. I arrived right on time. The house smelled like baked chicken and rosemary. Everything was polished, silverware shining, napkins folded in triangles, candles unlit but placed neatly in their holders. It was a stage and she was setting the scene. My sister was already seated at the dining table, scrolling through her phone with that familiar practiced detachment. My mother moved briskly between the kitchen and dining room, her movements clipped. When she saw me, she gave a smile that didn't touch her eyes. You came. Of course, I replied, hanging my coat on the chair. We sat. Plates were filled, glasses poured. But the usual chatter didn't start. It was like everyone was waiting for someone else to break the silence. Finally, my mother cleared her throat. All right, she began, clasping her hands together. We received something unusual yesterday. From the trustees. Her voice carried that sharp undertone I knew well. She wasn't confused, she was angry. It's a misunderstanding, she added quickly, glancing at my sister for support. Some paperwork mix-up. I cut a small piece of chicken, placed it neatly on my plate and said nothing. My sister leaned forward, lowering her voice like this was a private conspiracy. Mom says it's about money. It is, I said. Mom's fork clattered softly against her plate. Catherine, she warned. I met her gaze evenly. You used the inheritance account for the party. She blinked, caught off guard not by the accusation but by the bluntness. It's family money, she snapped. For family occasions. That's how it's always been. Not without both signatures, I said calmly. You know that. For a moment, the kitchen filled with only the hum of the refrigerator and the faint tick of the clock on the wall. My sister tried to laugh, the sound brittle. You're not seriously making this into a big deal. It already is, I interrupted. Mom inhaled sharply, sitting back. Her hands tightened around her napkin. You've always had a way of making things harder than they need to be. That sentence hit its usual mark. But this time, instead of shrinking, I let it sit between us like a mirror. She didn't see it yet, but this wasn't going to be resolved with guilt. The following morning, the calls began. First from Aunt Marjorie, who never missed an opportunity to stir a pot. Catherine, sweetheart, she started, too sweet. Your mom seems quite upset. Something about trustees? What on earth is going on? I'm sure she'll fill you in, I said. Oh, she's been very dramatic, Marjorie continued, delighted. You know how she gets when things don't go her way. But I have to say, this whole situation sounds serious. I could practically hear the gossip network clicking into gear. By mid-afternoon, a different kind of call came. One of the trustees' assistants. Ms. Moore, we've scheduled the formal review for Thursday at 9 a.m. You're welcome to attend in person or via video. Your choice. I'll be there, I said. My voice didn't waver. 2 nights later, I attended my sister's engagement planning dinner. I hadn't intended to go, but my absence would have been read as weakness and I wanted to see. The event was held at a small restaurant downtown. The moment I walked in, I felt the shift. People whispering, casting glances my way. My mother's smile was wide but strained. My sister, radiant in a white blouse, floated from table to table like a hostess. But beneath the shine, I noticed it, the tiny flickers of unease. One of my uncles leaned toward another relative, whispering. The event planner gave my mother a look of quiet concern when discussing payments. A family friend asked my sister if everything was all right with the trust. They were starting to hear things. During dessert, my sister approached me. Her voice was hushed but sharp. Why are you doing this? I set my fork down slowly. Doing what? This, she hissed. Dragging the family through the mud. Over what? A party? You always find a way to ruin things. I tilted my head. No. I just stopped pretending. Her jaw tightened. She looked ready to throw a retort, but someone called her name and she forced a smile before walking away. As I watched her retreat, I realized something important. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about the story they'd built. The golden daughter, the generous mother, the quiet sister in the corner. And now cracks were appearing. On Wednesday evening, less than 24 hours before the review, a white envelope slid through my mail slot. No stamp, no address. Just my name. Inside was a handwritten note from my mother. This is family. Don't make a spectacle. Withdraw your claim. We can fix this quietly. Below the neat script was a single sentence that made me pause. Think about what you'll lose if you don't. For years, those words would have sent me spiraling into guilt, wondering if I was the problem. But now I just folded the note neatly, slipped it back into the envelope and placed it beside my father's documents. Her threats no longer reached me. I spent the rest of the night preparing, organizing files, rehearsing timelines, making sure every piece of evidence was airtight. My kitchen became my war room, the hum of the refrigerator my only company. By midnight, everything was in place. I turned off the lights, stood at the threshold, and looked at the kitchen table covered in neat stacks. This wasn't noise. This was precision. The cracks in their castle were no longer hairline fractures. By tomorrow the walls would groan. And groan they did. Thursday morning arrived with a cold stillness. The sky was overcast, the kind that muted colors and made everything feel slightly heavier. I dressed slowly, dark slacks, a cream blouse, and the wool coat my father had given me years ago. It was simple, but it fit like armor. My tote bag, filled with meticulously organized folders, waited by the door. As I locked up the house, a gust of wind swept through the porch, scattering a few dried leaves across the steps. I paused to steady myself, taking a long breath. Today wasn't about emotion anymore. It was about precision. The trustee board's offices were in a converted courthouse downtown. The stone facade, weathered and gray, loomed as I approached. I'd walked past this building countless times growing up, never imagining I'd one day walk through those doors to challenge my own family. Inside, the marble floors echoed with each step. A receptionist directed me toward a side conference room. As I approached, I heard voices, low, strained. My mother's unmistakable tone cut through, sharp, controlled, like a woman holding a teacup with white-knuckled fingers. I pushed the door open. They were all there. My mother, dressed impeccably in a navy skirt suit, lips pressed thin. My sister, wearing an outfit that screamed casual elegance but didn't quite mask the tension in her jaw. Two trustees sat at the far end reviewing documents. David, my lawyer, stood near the corner, giving me a nod of quiet reassurance. Catherine, my mother said, standing. Her voice was warm for show, but her eyes weren't. I wasn't sure you'd come. I wouldn't miss it, I replied evenly. We took our seats. The long mahogany table stretched between us like a fault line. At the head sat Mr. Atwood, the senior trustee, a man in his 70s with kind eyes that could turn razor-sharp when the subject was legal responsibility. Let's begin, he said, adjusting his glasses. The trustee secretary began reading through the formal notice. A review of the Moore family trust has been initiated following documentation alleging misuse of shared inheritance funds without mutual authorization. My mother shifted slightly in her seat. She tried to maintain her composure, but I caught the smallest twitch in her fingers as she smoothed the hem of her skirt. David leaned forward, voice calm and clear. We've provided copies of the bank records, invoices, and event expenditures, all tracing back to the joint account. None of these transactions were signed by my client, Catherine Moore. One of the trustees, a woman named Helen, spoke next. Mrs. Moore, do you dispute these records? My mother offered a controlled smile. No, but it's a family account. I've always handled these things. This wasn't misuse. It was for a family celebration. My younger daughter's special night. Helen's tone remained polite but firm. The trust doesn't make exceptions for sentiment. There are legal processes for a reason. My sister jumped in. This is ridiculous. It was just a party. Catherine's making this into something ugly because she wasn't included. I met her gaze, holding it. You're right about one thing, I said softly. I wasn't included. Her mouth opened but nothing came out. For the first time her confidence faltered, not because of volume but because I didn't flinch. Mr. Atwood tapped the folder in front of him. We're not here to discuss family dynamics. We're here to examine documented misuse. Catherine, your filing triggered the review. Do you wish to add anything? I glanced at David, then back at the trustees. Only this, I said. My father created this trust to protect all of us equally. Not to fund favoritism. Not to erase one daughter for the comfort of another. I respected the rules because he did. I expect those rules to be upheld. The room fell quiet. My mother's expression didn't change, but I saw it, the faintest flicker of panic behind her eyes. She wasn't used to me speaking like this, especially not here. The questioning began in earnest. They reviewed each transaction one by one. Catering. Venue deposit. Decor rentals. Every expense from the party was laid bare under fluorescent lights. David calmly handed over corresponding screenshots and statements. My mother's explanations grew thinner, her voice tighter. She leaned on tradition, on misunderstanding, on trust within the family. But trustees don't deal in sentiment. They deal in signatures. And hers was the only one on those withdrawals. About halfway through, my sister shifted tactics. I don't understand why you're doing this, she hissed at me during a short recess in the hallway. Do you really want to humiliate Mom like this? I turned to face her fully. The hallway was empty except for us, and the muffled sounds of papers shuffling in the conference room. Humiliation. I repeated. I didn't make those withdrawals. I didn't post those pictures. She made those choices. I'm just not pretending they didn't happen. Her lips pressed together, her carefully built composure cracking again. You always wanted to make everything about rules. About control. No, I said quietly. I just finally stopped letting you rewrite the rules to suit yourself. She stared at me for a moment, searching for the soft version of me she was used to. But she didn't find her. When we returned to the room, the atmosphere had shifted. The trustees weren't looking at me anymore. They were looking at my mother. And not as a respected matriarch, but as a trustee member under review. Helen cleared her throat. Mrs. Moore, we're obligated to remind you that misuse of funds, even for family purposes, constitutes grounds for suspension of privileges until the board completes its findings. Mr. Atwood leaned forward slightly. This includes voting rights, account access, and beneficiary status. This is not a light matter. My mother's voice sharpened. You can't seriously mean to strip me of my rights over a few expenses. David responded smoothly, it's not a few expenses. It's a clear breach. And it's documented. Her eyes darted to me, cold and furious. But beneath the fury I saw it, the fear she'd never admit out loud. She'd built her authority on the assumption no one would challenge her. And now her foundation was being read aloud by people she couldn't intimidate. Then came the moment that shifted everything. Mr. Atwood opened a separate envelope. This was filed earlier this week. Catherine Moore has requested a provisional reassignment of voting privileges, pending outcome of the review, citing Clause 14 subsection B. My mother's head snapped toward me. You did what? I met her stare steadily. I followed the rules. The trustees exchanged quiet looks. Mr. Atwood continued, given the evidence presented and the fact that Catherine's claim is well documented, the board will temporarily transfer voting rights to her until the investigation concludes. This is standard procedure in misuse cases. For a heartbeat no one spoke. Then my sister whispered, you can't be serious. But they were. The gavel of paperwork had fallen, not loudly but decisively. I didn't gloat. I didn't smile. I simply inhaled deeply, feeling the weight of the wool coat on my shoulders grounding me. This wasn't about winning a scene. It was about claiming what was mine. As the meeting wrapped up, my mother gathered her papers with stiff movements. My sister avoided my eyes. The trustees exchanged polite farewells, but I caught something in their expressions. Respect. Not the kind given to the loudest voice, but to the one who knew the ledger better than anyone else in the room. Before leaving, Mr. Atwood said quietly to me, "Your father was a meticulous man. He'd be pleased that you're paying attention." It was the closest anyone in that room had come to acknowledging the emotional weight beneath the legal language. I walked out into the gray afternoon, the cold air hitting my face like a fresh start. The courthouse steps felt taller on the way down but lighter. In the parking lot, I spotted my mother standing by her car, arms crossed. She didn't call my name. He didn't have to. Our eyes met across the distance. Hers were filled with quiet fury, mine with quiet certainty. She had always assumed the seat of authority belonged to her by default. But today, as I slid behind my steering wheel, I realized something profound. I hadn't taken anything that wasn't mine. I'd simply sat down in the chair they'd pretended I didn't deserve. As I pulled out of the parking lot, the courthouse shrinking in my rearview mirror, the clouds finally broke. Thin beams of sunlight streaked across the gray sky, sharp and pale. It wasn't warm, but it was clear. I drove in silence, hands steady on the wheel, the hum of the engine almost meditative. For the first time in years, I wasn't bracing myself for their next move. They were the ones who didn't know what tomorrow would bring. By the time I reached home, the sun had slipped lower, casting long shadows across the porch. There was an envelope stuck halfway through my mail slot, hand-delivered again. My mother's handwriting. I slid it out and opened it slowly. Inside was a single sheet. "I hope you're happy. You've humiliated this family. Don't think this makes you better than us." No signature this time. No, "Love, Mom." I folded it carefully, placed it on the table next to the original birthday card, and exhaled. The letters sat side by side like bookends, one at the beginning of the betrayal, one near the end of it. The following week unfolded quietly on the surface, but beneath it, everything shifted. The trustees moved quickly. My temporary voting rights became active immediately, which meant any financial decision tied to the trust required my signature first. For years I had been the last to know. Now I was the first. The engagement dinner payments? Frozen. The decorator for the house remodel? Rejected. The family expense withdrawals my mother usually made without a thought? Flagged. Every email, every approval request, every phone call came to me first. And I didn't raise my voice. I didn't make speeches. I simply signed what was fair, and rejected what wasn't. Quietly. Firmly. The first real confrontation came on a Thursday evening, 1 week after the boardroom. I was sorting through a stack of trustee correspondence at the kitchen table when the doorbell rang. I knew who it was before I opened the door. My mother stood there, perfectly dressed, her posture still regal but her eyes sharp. "We need to talk," she said. I stepped aside. She walked in as if the house still belonged to her. "Old habits. Coffee?" I asked. "No," she said curtly. We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where my father used to sign every paper with quiet precision. She glanced at the folders spread out before me, her mouth tightening. "This is absurd," she began. "The trustees, the signatures, the power plays. You think sitting in that chair gives you control? It doesn't. You're still my daughter. This is still my family." I leaned back in my chair, folding my hands calmly. "It's not about control. It's about accountability. Something you've avoided for years." Her jaw clenched. "I built this family. I kept it together. Your father may have signed the papers, but I made the decisions. And you," she jabbed a finger toward me, "you were supposed to stay in your lane." For a moment, the years condensed into a single vivid memory. Me as a teenager, quietly cleaning up after another family event while my sister basked in praise. My mother giving me a tight smile, saying, "You're the reliable one." I used to take pride in that. But reliability had slowly been twisted into invisibility. I met her gaze. "That lane doesn't exist anymore." Her voice softened then, not with warmth but calculation. "Withdraw the reassignment. And this. We can fix it privately. No one has to know how deep this goes." And there was the fear. Not of losing money but of losing face. I smiled faintly. "They already know." She exhaled through her nose, long and slow. "You think this makes you strong? All you've done is turn your back on us." "No," I said quietly. I turned toward myself. She pushed back her chair and stood, every movement clipped. "This isn't over." I didn't stand. I didn't follow her to the door. I just said, "It already is." When the door shut, the house fell silent again. But this time the silence wasn't heavy. It was mine. A few days later, the trustees sent their official findings. I opened the letter slowly, though I already knew. The board had concluded that my mother's repeated withdrawals constituted a breach of fiduciary responsibility. Her voting rights were permanently revoked. My sister, having benefited directly from the misuse, was suspended from beneficiary privileges pending a 2-year review. Me. As the only remaining signatory with a clean record, the trustees offered me permanent voting control over the trust. It was almost anticlimactic. No loud announcement, no cameras flashing. Just a quiet letter in my hands, sunlight hitting the ink. I read it twice, then a third time. And somewhere between the second and third reading I started to laugh. Not out of cruelty. Out of release. For years I'd sat quietly on the sidelines while they decided everything. They told their stories so loudly that no one bothered to look at the documents gathering dust in drawers. But in the end it wasn't shouting that shifted power. It was patience. Precision. The engagement party my sister had been planning unraveled soon after. Vendors demanded payments my mother could no longer authorize. Friends whispered. Invitations were quietly withdrawn. I watched it all unfold from a distance, not with glee but with a detached clarity. She called me once during that time. "You could fix this," she said, voice brittle. "I could," I answered. She waited, expecting a softening that never came. When it didn't, she hung up without another word. 2 weeks later, I sat alone in my father's old study. The late afternoon sun poured through the tall window, catching the dust motes in the air. The same oak desk where he used to balance ledgers was now covered in neat folders. My folders. I traced my fingers over the grain of the wood. When I was a little girl, he'd let me sit on his lap while he worked. "Numbers don't lie," he used to say. "People do. Always keep your eyes on the paper, not the noise." I hadn't understood it then. I did now. A soft knock pulled me from my thoughts. Mrs. Hargrove, my elderly neighbor, stood in the doorway holding a small basket of scones. "Just wanted to check in on you," she said with a kind smile. "I'm all right," I replied, and I meant it. She placed the basket on the desk and patted my arm. "You look it. Stronger." After she left, I sat for a long time in silence, letting the weight of everything settle. Not like a burden but like a crown. Quiet. Thought. The final confrontation came unexpectedly at the grocery store of all places. I was reaching for a carton of milk when I heard my name. My sister stood at the end of the aisle. No makeup, hair pulled back, her eyes tired. For a moment she didn't say anything. Then softly, "I didn't think you'd go through with it." "I know," I said. He swallowed. "Mom says you ruined everything." I tilted my head. I didn't ruin anything. I just stopped playing along. For a brief moment I saw something flicker in her expression. Uncertainty, maybe even regret. But it passed. She walked away without another word. I stood there for a moment, the hum of the refrigerators filling the silence. And then I picked up my milk and moved on. That night I signed the final set of trustee papers at my father's desk. The room was dim except for a single lamp casting a warm pool of light over the documents. My pen moved steadily, line after line. With each signature a chapter closed, not loudly but decisively. When I finished, I sat back and looked around the study. It was quiet. Peaceful. They had tried to write me out with parties, captions, and unspoken hierarchies. But in the end, I didn't need to scream to be heard. I just needed to pick up the pen my father left behind. And now, the crown rested where it always should have, on a quiet head at a steady desk beneath the weight of earned authority. I closed the folder, turned off the lamp, and whispered into the stillness. My house. My silence. My terms. If this story shook you, hit subscribe. More real, emotional revenge stories are waiting, and each one cuts deeper than the last.